On October 6th, I would have told you we were on almost an unprecedented transformative progress that we are seeing in the Middle East. Israel, we have these conferences where I have it as my counterpart's the chief of defense, that's the senior military person. Then they have a minister of defense above that, like our secretary of defense. And so I interact with these guys on a daily basis. We would be sitting around a table with Israel and multiple chiefs of defense of Arab countries. We're talking about normalization. We're talking about integrated air defense against Iran. And I would tell you that the trajectory we were on until the morning of 7 October when Hamas attacked. And you've heard Hamas now come out afterwards and say they did this to stop normalization between Saudi Arabia and Israel. Saudi Arabia is the kingfish in the region. What they say, all the smaller countries basically listen to. And so that's why we think that was done. The actual plans were to do it later, but they wanted to accelerate that. If you ever saw the Brett Baer interview with Mohammed bin Salman, he said they were very close, within weeks possibly, of doing a normalization between Saudi Arabia and Israel. And that would have been the equivalent of when we saw that back in '73 between Egypt and Israel. So since then, we have seen what Iran, which is the hand behind every one of these militant groups, Hamas, Lebanese Hezbollah, the Houthis, a whole litany of them in Iraq and Syria, Kataib Hezbollah, Harakat al-Nujba, you can't even pronounce all these. But what Iran does is they fight through proxies. And they've operationalized every single proxy in the region, and they think of this as a once-in-a-generation opportunity to finally be able to go after and destroy Israel and to push the West out of the Middle East. So they are doing that all through proxies to try and hide their hand. And we see that with Hamas, completely built by Iran, Lebanese Hezbollah, which is up in Lebanon. They are pushing all the weapons into them. And we see this. We see it in the intelligence. We see it in the convoys that are moving advanced conventional weapons into there. We see that in what they've done to their proxy forces inside Iraq and inside of Syria. And then we see it down with the Houthis, which is something that we missed, to be very candid with you, much like Israel missed Hamas and what was happening. And if you have a question on that, I can give my personal opinion on why they did. 10 years ago, we said Yemen is no longer important, and we shifted all of our intelligence out of Yemen. We pushed a lot of it over to China, and we completely missed what the Houthis were doing in terms of their buildup and what Iran was doing. And now we're just now getting back to a level where we have some of the intelligence. Every day we are dropping bombs in Yemen against the Houthis, and they're doing stuff against shipping and the impact that has on shipping. So right now, transit through the Suez Canal is down 60%. 60%. Container traffic, remember that 90% of all container traffic is down, and 30% of all containers is down 90%. So what are they doing? They're going down around South Africa to get back in. And so what happens is you're going to have a shortage of containers. You're going to have a shortage of mariners is the big one. And then it's this late to need. So we're already starting to see, as companies are ordering things for Christmas, believe it or not, there's a shortage of mariners, a shortage of containers to be able to fill this. Remember when they Ever Given, that ship that got stuck in the Suez Canal for 2 weeks? And people finally learned how interconnected global commerce was, and there was a shortage of toilet paper at Costco. You can blame the Ever Given for that, and you see how interconnected, because we created this global supply chain that's based on profit. That you don't want to have a bunch of inventory sitting there, so they do this just-in-time logistics, and so it's very fragile. Now, the only positive thing that ever came out of COVID is the shipping industry increased their capacity of extra containers. So that's where we're just now starting to feel the impact. We still don't even know what the impact's going to be on global inflation. It's already up 1% globally, but we think it's going to go up a little bit more if we can't get the Houthi problem under control. So when I say Iran is mobilized, so they view this as a once-in-a-generational opportunity. You've seen all the reports, 175 attacks from October until 2 February against U.S. forces in Iraq and Syria. And I've got a bunch of bases in Iraq and Syria. And we are there in Iraq and Syria to defeat ISIS. That is the whole reason we are in there right now. Everybody, wait, did we beat them? I will tell you right now, there are a significant number of actual ISIS threats, both to this homeland and to all of the Western Europe, to the Caucasus, and to Eurasia, that we track on a daily basis. Some of them are coming out of Afghanistan, Pakistan, but predominantly coming out of Syria. And Iraq is not quite as bad, but we use the bases in Iraq to be able to go after ISIS inside of Syria. We've arrested individuals that are trying to go after the Paris Olympics by tracking them and what they're doing in Syria, and then passing that intelligence to their operatives inside of Europe to be able to stop these guys. That stuff doesn't make the news. You did see the news of the Uzbekistan individuals that came from the southern border. We were tracking who those individuals were linked up with inside of Syria and inside of Afghanistan and Pakistan. So it's all interconnected. If you were to ask me what my priorities are, the number one priority is to deter Iran, to deter them from their malign behavior, and to deter them from getting a nuclear weapon. Happy to take questions on that at the unclassified level. And it's pretty scary. And the capability that Iran has right now. The second priority is to counter violent extremist organizations, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, which Al-Qaeda has been significantly beat down. We're trying to make a comeback. And we have, like I said, 19 total tier 1 organizations. Everything from Lebanese Hezbollah, they have incredible capability, but right now they're focused solely on Israel. And then the third priority would be to compete strategically with China and Russia. And what we see China doing, interesting things. So right now, every drop of oil that comes out of Iran is sanctioned by the U.S. China buys 90% of Iran's sanctioned oil. So in effect, China is funding Iran's malign behavior and for what they do. And Iran gets that money, they put it right into their military, what's called the IRGC Quds Force, that is their Revolutionary Guard, which is designed to protect the regime and to then build their proxies as they go out and do attacks on Americans. I don't think people realize just how much Iran has already attacked Americans. If you go all the way back to our embassy bombing in '83, the Marine barracks bombing, the embassy bombing killed 17 Americans. Beirut, the barracks killed 241 Americans. And the Khobar Towers, and you go time after time. Do you realize we never responded to the embassy bombing of the Beirut barracks? Never responded to that. A lot of people don't realize that. Generally, if we don't respond within 96 hours of an Iranian action, we talk ourselves out of it. One of the first times we did was 2 Augusts ago, when they hit one of our, we took casualties, and we waited 8 days to be able to make sure the intelligence was lined up. So it's an interesting problem. What you have with Iran is they are on a trajectory. They had the Iran-Iraq war back in the 80s, if you remember that. 1 million people killed between Iraq and Israel and the Iran side. And so Iran said, hey, we can't do this land war thing. We are going to create a capability that's going to prevent people from attacking us. And so they put all their money into air defense to protect themselves and coastal defense, and then into long-range standoff munitions. And so that's the one-way attack UAVs you see now, which, by the way, they built an Iranian UAV, one-way attack UAV factory inside of Russia, and they're putting about 100 a week are attacking inside of Ukraine from Russia, built by Iranian factory inside of there. And then those are the same ones that are hitting our forces, are the same one they launched 180 at Israel. And so then they also put it into their long-range ballistic missiles, which they have significant capability. We saw that on April 13th. I can talk a little more detail on that if you'd like. But that was one hell of a defense in defense of Israel. But there's some second and third order effects that came out of that, and how Iran's learning from that, how we're learning from that as well. When I get to the third priority, China and Russia, we fly against Russian aircraft every single day, only place in the world inside of Syria. Russia went down to Syria. They basically helped Bashar al-Assad in his civil war that started in 2011, basically during the Arab Spring, and he went down and helped them. Iran helped them, and so Russia basically got a warm water port on the Mediterranean targets. They took out a 99-year lease, and they staged some forces down there, quite a large number of forces, but they basically pulled a lot of them out. They still keep a significant presence, but the majority have gone back, and they're fighting in the Ukraine right now. And we get generals, if they are in the Ukraine, they rotate them down into Syria, and these aircraft will go up, and there's a little, we fly knowing we're not going to shoot each other down. We could wipe out their Air Force in a matter of minutes. But they do very provocative things just to try and get a rise and to try and show that they're still a superpower, etc. So we will fly against Su-35, which is a very, very capable aircraft. on a day-to-day basis. We had them fly and try to intercept some of our MQ-9s. They're targeting ISIS, and the F-15s go up and they do this little dance. And that happens almost on a daily basis. And I think people sometimes, if you were to come back to the American people, they don't understand the risk that is accumulated every single day in places like that. So Russia is trying to maintain this relationship with Bashar al-Assad so they can have a long-term presence in Syria, really to get that warm water port in Tartus along the coast. China, when you look at the instruments of national power, diplomatic, informational, military, and economic, they use very small m, they use big D diplomatic, very strong in the informational environment, and huge in the economic environment. And so these lines you see are what we call the Belt and Road Initiative. The belt, these are the land routes of the belt, these are the water routes of the belt, and they have belt buckles, our main hubs, places like Gadar, Pakistan. It's for them to be able, if you think of the old Silk Road, this is them now how to move their produce. It's rail lines, it's roads, and how they move stuff, and they pay, and they sign these deals with these countries that give them, basically, they give them low interest loans, but it's like a balloon mortgage. The debt eventually comes, and the country can't pay it, and they say, okay, well then we will take control of the port. And we see this time and time again. And so they use this to be able to gain control and access into these locations inside of the Middle East. And this is the challenge we have. China gets 50% of its oil out of the Middle East. They import about 70% of their oil. And so if there's conflict with China, God forbid, but one of the things that CENTCOM can do is I can control their economy. Because 50% of their oil goes through the Strait of Hormuz out of the Middle East, and that is of the 70% that they import. So basically 35% of their economy goes through there. Like I talked about Iran, they're 90% of their oil is bought by China, 100% of it is sanctioned. The last bit of oil that makes it to China, of that 90%, is on a ship that's called a dark fleet. There's no automated information system tracking. The ship doesn't exist. It's not pinging in. It's not part of the international community because it's all sanctioned and illegal. And that's how they deliver their oil back into China. And it would take the entire Navy plus some to be able to get after that problem set. They operate about 300 ships to be able to do that. I would also tell you that we have great opportunity here in the Middle East, and it really comes through our partners. I spend, like I say, 50% of my time over there, but I spend my time back here calling on a routine basis. Just found out that Chad from Jordan, the Chief of Defense of Jordan, his nephew just passed away. It's a text to him, checking in on him, and you develop these relationships. I could pick up the phone, I know they will answer every single time. Defense of Israel, I'm talking to the Saudi Chad 10 times that day. We were leading up to it. We had some tremendous intelligence that we knew basically when the attack would happen, but I can't give them the sensitive intelligence. So we're talking about this. And eventually, on the day of the attack, I'm like, Fayad, I said, I need an area in the north of Saudi Arabia that I can fly my jets through because you can't have it. I said, Fayad, you're about to have 100 UAVs fly through Saudi Arabia. They're going to reach Israel. They won't have the time and the space to be able to shoot them down, and you're going to have them hit, and you're going to have a regional war. And so it's a matter of, I'm arguing with him back and forth, 10 phone calls. And I said, Fayad, I need from this town to this town and everything north. And he finally says, okay, you can have that. And there's some conditions he put on it, but that doesn't happen if you're picking up the phone for the first time and you have a superficial relationship with them. I can tell you he owns 367 camels. I can tell you his wife's name is grandkids' names. And so you develop these relationships over time, and that's how and it's to advance U.S. interests in the region. My secret weapon is my wife when I bring her with on some of these trips. So she was in there getting the meeting with the wife, getting Hannah put on her hands, but you get a chance to meet. When you do that, it opens up their families. You get to know their families. You get to know their kids. I think I'm going to be adopted by a country because his daughter got a $15,000 a week allowance. Seriously. But by doing that, you develop these relationships, and it allows you to advance U.S. interests in the region. What I'm going to do, I'm going to pause because I really want to. Sir.
I know it's, first of all, thank you, General, for coming and speaking with us. One question is, and I know it's complicated because it's a why don't we just, that Iranian oil is sanctioned, why don't we just cut it off?
How would you cut it off?
Just don't let it out of our hand.
So the challenge is, we do stop it. So what we'll do is a sanctioned ship, it's over in Singapore. The Department of Justice is the ones who announced this. So we are seizing this ship. I'll use the Suez Rajan was the name of the ship. We have seized this oil. And generally the way it works, they call this the master of the ship, and they'll say, you are carrying illegal sanctioned Iranian oil. And generally a lot of times, because it's been moved around so often, the ship transfers, he doesn't know it. And they'll say, you're now to move to the Port of Houston, and we're going to download that oil. He says, roger that. And so that ship starts sailing, and usually about 3 days into that, the Iranians figure it out, and they say, we're going to seize a U.S. ship of oil from Chevron, the Richmond Voyager, 4th of July. So last year, we almost went to war with Iran. I didn't get a chance to see any fireworks last year. We were going to make our own. Because they will tit for tat, and unless you are willing to go to war and you have all the resources of being able to do that, the dark fleet is incredibly challenging. And we're having this, I want to call it an unholy alliance between Russia, China, and Iran right now. Iran is teaching Russia how to avoid sanctions. How did Iran get this capability when they've been sanctioned, even through the maximum pressure campaign? And they have figured out how to bypass the sanctions. Sanctions only work if the entire world is in on it. Because if only like 2 people are sanctioning, there's more than that, they're going to figure out how to bypass it. So it's a really wicked challenge, and they will just seize other things unless we are willing. They have to be willing to know that if we do that and they take one of our ships, we're willing to go to war with it.
So this, where I'm kind of going with that is, and this is very simplistic, overly simplistic, but this country has $33 trillion in debt.
I'm sorry, say it again?
This country has $33 trillion in debt, and the interest is compounding.
Why the greatest risk for national defense?
And when I hear you talk about everything we're doing over there, it's change. It'd be interesting to know how much we spend on CENTCOM per year and everything we do over there, but that's just out of curiosity. But why don't we just neutralize Iran? I mean, we could do it rather than this tit for tat. Why don't we just, instead of this gnat in your face for eternity, why don't we just okay, that's enough, let's shut it off.
So you're talking going to war with Iran?
Well, whatever you guys decide is best, but it's neutralized.
Well, you're neutralizing Iran, you're talking about, so they have, I don't think they have incredible capability. Thousands of medium-range ballistic missiles. To do that, we do all the modeling and we look at all this. You're talking thousands of U.S. casualties to be able to do that. And I have all the plans to be able to do that. I know what it takes to do that. You're talking about moving most of the U.S. military into the Middle East to be able to do that. Unless you're talking about nuking Tehran and killing millions of civilians. But to take out their capability, which their offensive capabilities are their missiles. That is the greatest risk to the region. And then we watch, they're a nuclear threshold state. What does that mean? That means they're staying just below the threshold to make a nuclear weapon. So right now, they have enough goo, 60% highly enriched uranium, that they can go to 90%. The easy part is going from 60 to 90. The hard part is going from 0 to 5%. They have enough to make a 90% a spherical goo of highly enriched uranium in less than a week, days. That's to get the uranium, we lost that. The enriched uranium, we lost that fight. And they can make multiple of those. The hard part is that how do you weaponize it? You gotta make it, you metallicize it, you gotta make it a spherical object, or you gonna make it a gun type system, middleman, you can make it a plutonium, or an implosion device, that's what the cool guys do. And that's gonna take longer. The assessment, and this is unclassified, is that if they forego all testing, modeling, and they just say we're gonna blow a nuke underneath a mountain, they can do that in a couple months. Look at how we're reacting to Russia and North Korea right now, that they're a nuclear power. And so our goal is to make sure that they don't become that. And then what do we do if they do? So that's $1 million question. What does Israel do as we see that? So the challenge will become, do they go to 90%? If they go to 90%, then they've made a decision. But back to your statement, you're talking trillions of
That
dollars.
was a question, not a statement.
Well, that's the question, it would be trillions of dollars and thousands of casualties and hundreds of thousands of Iranian casualties. Does that answer your question, sir?
Thank you.
Sir. Sir, then sir.
How do you know they haven't gone to 90%?
I would tell you our intelligence is pretty exquisite. We also have something called the International Atomic Energy Agency that goes in and does monitoring on that. And they're the ones that have probably the most precise, and then we also have some pretty exquisite intelligence. I'm confident they have not gone to 90. And I'm confident we'd likely be able to see some of that. Does that answer the question, sir? Sir.
64 years ago, when I was in the Marines, I went to an Army base at Fort Sill because I was in charge of an Honest John outfit, and it was a class with 30 people in it, and my best friend was a Pakistani captain. Now, it got into all of how to arm the weapon that I was responsible for, the nuclear weapon, and then I'm in Pakistan had the atomic bomb then, 64 years ago. It seems to me that you could go on Google now and figure out how to do it. And
How to make the bombs not hard.
And certainly AI, but I'm assuming, and I might be wrong, of course. My wife tells me I am quite often. but I think Iran, the way they're going, they'll get an atomic bomb. So let's say they get an atomic bomb. What are they going to do with it? They are not going to, there are about 7 nations in the country, something like that, that have atomic bombs. None of them would think of using it because we have got so many bombs that we destroy them, wipe them off the map if they started messing around with it. So why are we so concerned about Iran having the atomic bomb?
Because their stated goal is to wipe Israel off the map.
But they won't use that. If that's their goal, they're not gonna drop a bomb, atomic bomb on Israel.
But that
They
could-
would, their
would
nation would be.
Right, but it would also change the calculus and how we respond. Look at how we are responding to Russia, look how we're responding to North Korea right now. Is the only counter I could give to that in terms of it. And then if they get an atomic bomb, the Middle East will change overnight and forever. Not for 1 minute will Saudi Arabia wait to try and develop a nuclear bomb or buy one. And so I think you would see a nuclearized Middle East, which is the last thing we want, given the number of organizations that operate over there. Would they use it immediately? No. The other thing you got to figure out is how do you deliver it. The hardest part of it, they could develop a nuclear weapon. I could figure out. I mean, I've been to classes on this. You can build a nuclear weapon. How do you deliver the nuclear weapon? That's probably the hardest part when you talk about putting this into if you're using a implosion type device versus a gun type system requires 3 times as much uranium, etc.
Well, my favorite president was Truman. When he bombed Japan, he introduced 75 years of peace, relatively. Nobody wants to use it. Kim, you think Kim is going to use it? No. Iran is not going to use it. Nobody has used it because they're scared to death. They're scared to death that they'll be wiped off the map if they do.
That's mutually assured destruction. That's the whole nuclear deterrence.
Yeah, sure.
So what I am convinced, and this is open source and the statements are out there, if they sprint to a nuclear weapon, you will see a third party intervene on that. That they will never allow, because of the statements that Iran has made about their intended goals. So, my 2 cents on that.
Okay.
Sir.
I'm just wondering, with Israel moving forces to the north, how likely do you think it is that they will engage in more intense hostilities with Hezbollah, and what's the probability of a greater conflict breaking out in the Middle East?
That's what keeps me up at night every night, right now. And if you're asking me if I'm in Vegas, 73. So right now, you have 65,000 Israelis that are 5 kilometers from the border have been displaced. So they're internally displaced people. That means when I go to Tel Aviv, I'm in a hotel, I will always meet people from the northern border, and they're coming up on 9 months now, plus that they've been displaced. Tremendous domestic pressure on the government to take action. And what they want is they want to push Lebanese Hezbollah back 7 to 13 kilometers, that's the distance of an anti-tank guided missile, based on topography, that there can be no Lebanese Hezbollah in that territory to be able to allow their people to move back, because they don't want to have a Hamas type environment. Because right now, the kibbutz that were attacked are closer than Saratoga is to here, from Gaza. I've stood on the Gaza border multiple times. I've been in their tunnels before October 7th, when they've come into Israel. So they don't want to be able to allow these forces, these Lebanese Hezbollah, which have stated in their whole goal, they have forces that are specifically designed to go in and kidnap or kill Israeli civilians. 2006 war that Israel went in their last major conflict in when they went into Lebanon. What predicated that is Lebanese Hezbollah captured 2 Israeli soldiers and took them back into Lebanon, and so they started a whole ground invasion on that. So you have that dynamic right now, but we're trying to make sure diplomacy works. There are 13 places along the Lebanese border that are contentious. And literally we're talking from me to the distance of my wife to here to the front gate on distances. 13, 7 have been solved, 6 remain, 4 are easy, 2 are hard. So what they want to be able to do is say, what does Lebanese Hezbollah get out of this if they're to pull back 7 to 13 kilometers? They're going to get this disputed territory on the blue line, it's called, back for them. And so it comes out of that, and then they also want no Israeli aircraft on the top. Very difficult for Israel to accept the no overflights based on the terrorist threats that come out of there. But Lebanese Hezbollah makes Hamas look like kindergarten. You're talking 150,000 rockets and missiles, many of them precision guided. They can overwhelm the Iron Dome system, they can hit Tel Aviv. And so the worry is that the pressure is so great right now to take action that right now, I mean, there's 40 rockets fired today. If you go on and you turn on the TV inside of Israel, 80% of it will be talking about the north, 20% about the south, about Gaza. And so there's, just like we have internal politics as well, that is weighing very heavily on population as well. So that's the one that keeps me up at night. Lebanese Hezbollah just today did 3 UAVs into a military base that did not get shot down. They injured 18 Israeli soldiers. So what Israel do, they'll go back, they'll strike the target. So the unintended consequences of escalation, and both sides believe they can control it. Talk to any firefighter, you can't always control fire. So that's what I worry about, is the unintended escalation for that. The Iranian-aligned militia groups inside Iraq and Syria said if Israel goes north, they're going to hit them, they're going to hit our bases as well. Iran said they might get involved. I have something called the Theodore Roosevelt coming to join us in about 10 days. That's going to make sure that should something happen, that Iran stays out of this. Sure.
How does OPEC play a role in this, the fact that you would think the other oil producers could essentially, if they were willing, pump enough oil to starve Iran out with those oil production?
I can't answer that one really to give you the best answer, but I mean, right now Iran sells their oil at a discount, and China loves it because we're getting great oil at a discount. So China's not going to want them to do that. They're sanctioning Russian oil right now.
Right.
And that Russian, interesting, the Russian oil goes right through the Red Sea. And you know who's buying all the Russian oil? India. So you watch it, the dynamics of the oil markets, and you know, Wyoming people know a lot about the oil markets here as well. It is really challenging on that.
Okay. Can you talk about Afghanistan since the pullout? How are things now since the U.S. has pulled out, and then sort of your view of the future with Afghanistan?
It's exponentially worse. So if you go back to where we were 2 years ago, what's happening inside Afghanistan? Is that ISIS, quick ISIS class. The head of ISIS, if you were to look at a wire diagram, and so the head of ISIS is in Syria. They have these affiliates, much like we have regional combatant commands, so does ISIS. Their most capable one is called the Al-Siddiqui office. And it goes from Kazakhstan all the way to the Philippines. And they're the most prolific organization, and they sit above ISIS-K. Have you ever heard the ISIS Khorasan? That's one of their organizations, and there's ISIS caucuses. And so those are the two organizations that they basically have. We have the Al-Qarar office, that's one that is down in Africa. But right now, ISIS-K, the ones that did the Eddie Gate, and then the Al-Siddiqui office, they all operate out of both Afghanistan and the very difficult terrain of Pakistan. And they have a stated goal to attack inside the U.S. They're the ones that did the Russia attack at the Crocus Music City Hall. They're the ones that did the first Iran, because it's very accessible for them to be able to get there. There's been multiple people say, why haven't you taken out more ISIS? Well, the Taliban actually went after ISIS. They're completely opposed, but they're like going in and doing massive sweeps through areas without the precision that we would go in and hit the exact house. So ISIS moved, they moved to Pakistan, they moved to some really difficult terrain to get to, and they're still planning their attacks from those locations. And so that's what we are still trying to get after. But then what we do is a lot of stuff through the intelligence. We pass intelligence from what we're collecting to both law enforcement intelligence agencies and our partner nations, both in NATO and Europe, and that's how we're getting after threats. There's been multiple arrests inside Europe based on intelligence that we collect on going after these individuals that have stopped. We call them diving saves. They're trying to bomb Christmas markets in Strasbourg. They're trying to do Paris Olympic attacks. That's the one we're watching very closely right now. And some of those could be self-inspired. They can be directed from them, or they can just be, I'm watching my jihadi movies online, and I want to go out and take a shot. So that's a concern. Ma'am?
I noticed, I've been watching, and what you said makes me wonder.
Part of what we're hearing here, because the questions is that it makes me potential also that despite people and all that success, which it was, thanks to you and the team.
It was a tactical success. It might have been a strategic loss.
Yeah, and that's part of the question is that Iran, because of all the things we just talked about, is they're on the offense. I mean, they're forcing the issues through their proxy. And, yeah, I saw them. That's part of the issue, which how you solve that. So that's all great. I'm curious about recently the reformist in Iran has forced a runoff the presidential election. So
5 July is the runoff. We won 42% of the vote.
yeah.
And Jalil, the hardcore hardliner, they won 38%.
Yeah.
It'll all depend on voter turnout.
I don't know
How much they took the vote.
I'm curious about your thoughts about him. I mean, I was just probably not going anywhere with any regime, but it's sort of an indicator, and I just wonder, is it really an indicator?
Oh, I think if we can just get beyond the 20% of the regime in Iraq and we get to the 80% of the people, we have so much in common with them. I mean, they are highly educated. I mean, if you go back to the 70s, remember, our twin pillar strategy was Saudi Arabia one pillar, Iran was the other. And that was back in the Shah's time. But the Iranian people they hate the regime. They absolutely despise it. And so when you see things like the hijab and they rise up, and they're kind of looking on the sidelines going, I wish you best of luck. They want change, and it's the regime's whole goal is to stay in power. The number one job of the regime is to keep in power. But there's, so can you use soft power? Can you use all kinds of other methods to be able to come up? You've got to be able to back it up. You've got to be able to carry it through. Sure. Okay.
That's right.
Sure, come back.
Would you care to comment about artificial intelligence
Sure.
and the use of drones, the science of war? It seems to be changing at a pretty fast pace. How is our military doing as far as keeping up with it?
We use artificial intelligence every single day. So what I will tell you, we use it for targeting people, not autonomously. I could literally take a human out of the loop, and the computer could say, I've discovered this, have this weapon, shoot at that. Now the pilot would have to pull the trigger unless it's a drone. But what we found, if I could just back up a little bit, we found the most effective technique is to have a human enabled by artificial intelligence. So right now, in the CENTCOM area, we use everything called computer vision, so think satellites from space, both commercial and our own national tactical means, identifying objects. And AI is all about data labeling. If probably the head of the Chinese AI, he said, if I had $1 million, I would spend 990,000 of it on labeling and 10,000 of it on the algorithm. You can always build the algorithm. So you label all this data. So right now, my problem for Iran is mobile transport vector launchers, the archers. They got a shitload of missiles. I want to get after the archers, the shooters, because they can't put the missiles on a shooter if it's gone. So how do I find these? Through computer vision, we label 100,000 labels to get to the subontology of what a system is. We did a system where we took the Russian Zapad exercise, that's their Western military district pre-Ukraine. And we went through and had all of our analysts go through and just fine-tune, find every single thing that's in this 30 by 30 kilometer chip from our own imagery. And it took them X amount of time, and they say there's 27 SS-26 missiles in here, there's 54 tanks, there's this many, this many, this many. And then we had our algorithms and artificial intelligence go through, and so we found that we were about 75% accurate with just humans, but it took 100 hours. The artificial intelligence got through that in an hour, so literally 90 times faster, but it was only 40% accurate. We took the same artificial intelligence and put that on the human. We found the humans now were 90% accurate and did it in like 3 or 4 hours. So the point being, AI enabled. We do a ton of stuff to determine ship traffic. Ships go straight line distances because it's all about the cost of moving from point A to point B. It's all about money. If a ship makes a 90-degree turn, I can guarantee you with 90% accuracy it's doing something illegal. Ships don't do that. Ship to ships, they don't do that either unless one of them is broken into transfer sailors. So we can do a lot of this, and we can identify AIS tracks, and we can run it through our algorithms. We do a lot of this. And CENTCOM, I would tell you, is leading a lot of the effort on this for DoD. We do a lot of stuff with autonomous assets, robotic ships, we have sail drones. We've had sensors go out for 126 days. They're longest, not a single complaint from the crew. They're autonomous robots. And they're just collecting data. And they're taking pictures all the time, and it goes to an algorithm and says, that's a ship. It's pinging an automated information system. It looks like a Maersk ship with containers, nothing to see here. That ship looks like a Dow. It doesn't have an AIS. Let's take a look at this. And so now I can take this phone. We have one of our fast interceptors. We have an autonomous vessel that can go over 100 knots on water. That's ludicrous speed. The guy who designed it has the most time over 200 knots without ever flipping a boat. So I can close the distance very quickly. It can go a lot faster than 100 knots, by the way. If you're unclassified, like 100 knots. It can close the distance. I have sensors on it. They can look at it and say, whoa, there's nothing to see here. Destroyer, you don't need to come here. Or don't launch your helicopter. Or there's some crazy stuff going on here. So now I send a helicopter, I send a destroyer. It makes me efficiently use my manned assets. We use this all the time. Does that answer the question, sir?
Is there any worry about someone in a basement and a computer ever taking over any of these systems?
I don't worry about that.
Okay.
I do worry about some other crazy in the basement on a computer. Sir?
How do you view the hypersonic threat from Russia and China?
Interesting enough, Patriot PAC-3 shot down a hypersonic Kinzhal missile in Ukraine. First hypersonic shoot down. But a hypersonic, by definition, goes over Mach 5 times the speed of sound.
Right.
Generally, you're talking about 3,300 miles an hour. But it also has to be maneuverable. That's truly the definition of a hypersonic. It is concerning because when you look at even what the Houthis are shooting, if you're talking an exo-atmospheric, that means it's gone above 100 kilometers, so you're in space. We're the only nation that is currently in the Red Sea that can shoot that down. So we shot down a medium-range ballistic missile from Iran, from our destroyers. Israel shot down using their ground-based systems. And you want to shoot down those systems exo-atmospheric before they come back in,
right,
and they start maneuvering. When you get out in space, they're going Mach 10. It's how fast are they going when they close in and they get into the atmosphere, and they're still going above Mach 5. We have the ability to shoot those down. We're always making upgrades with our software. It's our partners that are lagging on a lot of this. Sir?
Let's talk about a management standpoint, and we rotate our senior leaders every 2 to 4 years. 3 is a common rotation. Frank McKenzie retired, you came in, you sound like you're on the top of your game now. How long did it take? And what's happening in your 21 countries with your competitors that are running those places? And are we at a disadvantage because we have a 3-year rotation?
I don't think so, because I would tell you, we have incredible depth in our leaders. Who I think will eventually replace me, there's 3 names out there probably. Any one of them could step. There'll be a little bit of a gap when they take over. You gotta get your game up a little bit. But if if that mountain lion had attacked me today, I would have killed it just like Samson the lion. But if I flipped that ATV going 50 miles an hour today, my deputy could step in. There'd be a little bit of a gap for a little bit, and then he'd be able to take over the job. So the one thing I think we do exceptionally well is build depth and the development. I was Frank McKenzie's chief of staff, and I was Joe Botel's chief of staff at CENTCOM. So I understood CENTCOM, but I didn't have the relationships is the hardest part. Our component commanders, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine, Special Ops, and Space, they talk to their components all the time, and they will have the opportunities. Whenever I'm with the Chuds, I introduce them to them, so they start developing these relationships at an early age. So I think we do very, very well with that. Now, the difference in that, if you look at, let's just take Hamas, for instance, or Lebanese Hezbollah, their commanders stay in position 10, 12, 15 years. That's why it's so important, and why Israel, part of their strategy is to go after the brigade and battalion level leadership, because they've been in position for 10 years. Much harder to replace them. Again, I think we have incredible depth. You got good leaders, bad leaders, and then they take over, and everybody's different. But the one thing I think we do is we really develop our people really, really well. Does that answer your question, Helen? All right. Ma'am?
What do our NATO allies think of Netanyahu?
I don't know NATO. That's UCOM. I would only speculate, but I could tell you what all my Arab partners think of him. They think he is trying to stay in power so he doesn't go to jail. So, I mean, you're tracking all the stuff that was happening up until October 6th. There were massive rallies to try and force an election. It's interesting. 2 months ago, if there was an election, he would have lost. Right now, it's trending. He's neck and neck with probably the one individual guy, Benny Gantz, who was the former Minister of Defense and Chief of Defense. And so they view, so he's up for corruption charges and a bunch of other things. If he is out of power, there will be then a trial most likely that would occur, or there would be an election, and they would call for an election. So you know the whole deal. He made basically an alliance with some very extreme organizations inside of Israel to be able to stay in power, and they can pull the card and say, if you don't do this, we will pull out of the government. The government collapses, an election happens, he loses power, he's out of government. That's what all of our air partners think. Yeah.
I know it's not part of your purview, but can you speak on what's happening with Ukraine and Russia?
Broadly, when I talk to Chris Cavoli all the time, it's so we talk about principles of war mass, which means number of people, number of equipment, the amount of things that you can put into the fight matters. Russia has a capability of mass all by itself with a number of people and things they can put into the fight. And so what they have done is they're putting just tons of people at this problem on an industrial base. They nationalized it. And I would tell you, they came back, so we thought initially, the intelligence community said it would take them this long to recover their industrial base, the things that make the weapons, the tanks, all that. They've come back 4 times faster than what they thought. They just put a new Minister of Defense in. He was a guy who understands business and industry. There's a reason they put him in. He's not a warfighter. He's someone who's going to help their industrial base. And so what you have inside of Ukraine, it's a math problem. You know, it's how can they defend themselves? That's why there's this great desire for air defense systems. The challenge with Ukraine is their ability to produce young men to go to the front and fight. Interestingly enough, they don't draft under the age of 25. It's 25 and older. Just the opposite of what we would do, because they want this generation needs to survive. And so they've slowly lowered that age over time. It's, you know, it's a very political discussion. It's very challenging. So I mean, every war ends in a negotiated settlement. So generally you do better when you're negotiating from a position of strength. I think we will eventually see some form of a negotiated settlement on what that looks like. But it's not, the numbers are staggering. Hundreds of thousands killed. It is staggering, the amount of destruction. A lot of it's still kept out of the mainstream media. What else? Two more questions.
MBS, talk about him. What's he gonna do?
Mohammed bin Salman?
Yeah.
Right, so Mohammed bin Salman is the crown prince, the heir apparent, and actually the de facto ruler of Saudi Arabia. King Salman is the, and he's basically been sick for a while. He's 38 years old. He will be in charge for the next 50 years. So his goal is to change Saudi Arabia. And I believe he's already hit irreversible momentum. If you have not been to Saudi Arabia in the last year, you have not been to Saudi Arabia. You go to downtown Diriyah, this is part of Riyadh. It looks like East Germany in the 1990s. There's 30 cranes, 28 resorts being built, Michelin-starred restaurants, no women wearing hijabs, every person's on a cell phone. He has won the youth over, and they have a huge youth in the country. So they couldn't change if they wanted. Basically, the people that are going against what he's trying to do is the rural communities and some of the more traditionalists. And he is basically trying to change from a petrol economy to diversify. So if you want to sell BMWs in Saudi Arabia, you have to headquarter your company in Saudi Arabia, or you can't sell there. It's actually kind of brilliant. Same thing for sports, same thing for movies. He's trying to create a sovereign wealth fund of $3 trillion. He's got about $800 billion, which is why they are very reluctant to get involved with the movies, where they fought for 8 years. They're great cheerleaders on this. But that he is trying to transform the Saudi economy. You can go there, they will make you the best virgin drink of any. The only thing they need right now is just add alcohol. So if you go to any hotel there, and you're already seeing, so I mean, literally that was verboten, you know, for years and years and years. You're already starting to see they have alcohol in the diplomatic order, and you're starting to see this much like you see in the United Arab Emirates. But I think he is on. The only thing that will change it is if he's killed. He is transforming the entire Saudi country. And they have a thing called Vision 2030. By 2030, he wants to have a certain level of change inside the country. Who else? Yeah.
So you talk about the importance of building all these relationships. And when I think of building strong relationships where you can trust people, it takes time. But with this quick turnaround, 3 years, whatever, what is some of the tactics that you use to be able to develop the depth in these relationships that allows you to have these trusted conversations on a daily basis?
Get out of the office is what I tell you. So when I go there, you have to do the obligatory sit across from the table, an American flag on my side, their flag's on the other side. Here's the tea. They read their scripted talking points. I read mine. You know, I don't like to use talking points, but I talk to them, and then we say, all right, we're done with this conversation, and then we go out and do something different. And so I will tell you stories. We're going into Kyrgyzstan, the Kyrgyz Republic. Russia has a huge thumb on them because they control 99.5% of the energy that goes in there. And I'm flying in, and right now I have no meetings set up. No one's going to meet with me because Russia told them not. In fact, they told them not to let my plane land. But their civil aviation authority said, don't let them land. Well, I'm going to land. So I'm going to the embassy. So I set up a meeting with the embassy, the ambassador was working all this. And I said, let's just see if we can get a meeting with the foreign affairs. That's their State Department. So he says, all right, you can have one meeting with them. I can't meet with the child. I can't meet with the Minister of Defense. And so I went into the foreign affairs and I said, I'm here to listen. I said, I'm brand new to the job. I want to understand your perspective. I'm going to take it, and I'm going to make sure I capture your views and I'm able to share that back in Washington. I'm doing an assessment the first 90 days, and I want to make sure I capture your views. If you just go in and say you're going to listen, it changes everything. So I got a lecture for about an hour and a half, and I said, I really appreciate your views. I'll make sure I capture those. That was the litmus test. So I'm driving back from his office back to the embassy, and the chief of defense and the minister of defense now want to meet me. So we meet, and then later, we're on a horse, riding in the mountains on horseback, and at the end of this whole trip, he's bear hugging me and says, he's been wounded, I've been wounded, and we're talking these stories. You're trying to find this connection, and then you want to be able to say, how can we build on that going forward? When you change that after 3 years, the people that are going to take over from me are probably one of my component commanders who already has relationships throughout the time. When we have meetings, I'm with the shop, one of my components is usually sitting next to me, so it's a familiar face. And so it just takes time. And the Arab world, if they call it the closed circle, to break into it, it just takes time, but you have to be genuine. I'm very honest with them. When I say, I can't do that for you, here's why. But if you string along and say, let me check on that, it's a soft no, where you just keep stringing along. I say, no, I can't do that, here's why. They appreciate that more than ever, trying to just string along. But my biggest thing is get the hell out of the office and go out and do it. I love camels, I really do. So I will go out, and they know that. We'll go out to their camel farms, and I love understanding. Do you think horses are expensive? The average camel is minimum $50,000, and the stud camels are going for $2, $3, $4, $5 million.